Thanks for joining us again. This is Nick McPhee, and in this video I'll go over how we save our work in DrRacket and then upload that to Canvas. It's important that we can save our work. DrRacket doesn't automatically save your work to the cloud like tools like Google Docs do. We'll instead have to save our work in files that live on the computer that we're using, whether that's your laptop or one of the computers in the computer science lab. You can load those files back into DrRacket later to continue work on a project. You can also do things like email Racket files, for example, to people on your team or who you worked with in a study session. And you could submit files like this to Canvas as a way of turning in your work. You will need to be able to submit your work to Canvas so that we can give you feedback on it. That will require that you save your work to a Racket file, which you can then upload to Canvas. In this video, we'll go over both the saving and the submitting part of the process. To demonstrate saving our work, we'll create a simple example file and save it to our disk. Saving is usually easy. The hard part can sometimes be finding the files so you can submit them later. So we'll also make sure we know where the file is. So we have something to save. Let's assume we have the code from before that defines the length and width for a red, green, and blue rectangle. And then we've defined a rectangle area function that computes the area of a given rectangle. We also have several tests that check that we're computing the area correctly in that function. How then do we save our work? In many applications, the Save option is in the File menu. So let's look there. Yowza! There are lots of options. We have Save Definitions and Save Definitions As, and then a Save Other submenu with 4 other options. We'll usually just use Save Definitions, and I'll show that in a second. Save Definitions As lets us save a collection of definitions we've already saved, but under a new name. We may occasionally want to use Save Definitions as Text under Save Other. DrRacket sometimes does some fancy things in how it saves definitions, and that can create issues for other people we want to share our work with. When that happens, saving the definitions as text will often make things better. This documentation page goes over all the menu options in DrRacket. The QR code should get you there if you don't want to try to get the URL from the video. Today, I'll just use Save Definitions from the File menu to save our definitions. Because we've never saved these definitions before, DrRacket asks us what we want to call the Racket file and where we want to put it. The details of this dialog will vary from operating system to operating system, but it should be pretty similar. Racket files have a .rkt extension, so we want our file to end in .rkt as well. DrRacket has highlighted Untitled, but left the .rkt alone, which is a hint that we only want to change the untitled part of the name. Our file name can have spaces and fancy punctuation marks, but that can create problems later for both you and other people. So I'd recommend sticking with letters, numbers, dashes, and underscores. For this example, I'll call the file rectangle_area.rkt. Now, before we click the Save button on the bottom right, we want to think about where we want to save the file. My DrRacket is currently set up to save in my home folder on my laptop, but if I saved everything there, my home folder would quickly turn into a big cluttered mess. So let's go into my Documents folder and see what's there. Turns out that I've already created a Courses folder, and in that there's a CSI 1301 folder, and in that there's a Video Examples folder. Let's select that folder to tell DrRacket we want to save our file there. You're not likely to have that particular folder structure on your computer, so you want to think about where it makes sense to save your Racket files, creating folders and subfolders as is appropriate. Remember that you'll probably have quite a few Racket files before you're done with this course, so at a minimum, you might want to create a CSI 1301 folder somewhere to store your work in this class. Before we click Save, it's important to note, either mentally or even on a piece of paper, where you just saved the file. We'll have to be able to find it again in order to submit it to Canvas in a bit. Once we're happy with the name and the location, though, we can save the file by clicking the Save button on the bottom right, or just pressing the Return or Enter key. If we want to work on this file later in DrRacket, we can use the Open or Open Recent menu options in the File menu. Now that we've saved a file and we know where it is, we'll go through the process of submitting it to a Canvas assignment. I'll start by going to canvas.umn.edu, which will take us to the University of Minnesota Canvas site. If I wasn't already logged in, I would need to log in and perform my two-factor authentication, just like if I wanted to go to my email. Once I'm logged in, the Courses tab on the left should show me my active courses, including the demo course that I created for doing demonstrations like this. I'll select that. You would, of course, select an actual course that you're enrolled in, like CSI 1301. Now I'm going to switch to Student View. You shouldn't ever need to do this, but I have to do it in order to do things like submit assignments. Now I'll select the demo assignment. Again, you would select an actual assignment that you want to submit work for. Note that the assignment page has the note Submitting a File Upload. That tells us that we're expected to upload a file in order to turn in our work on this assignment. It also says File Types RKT, which tells us that the only kind of file we can upload here is a file with a .rkt extension. In other assignments, we might allow other file types, like .txt or .pdf. But here, we have to submit a .rkt file to turn in a Racket file. Now that we're ready to submit, we'll click Start Assignment in the upper right. This gives us the Canvas File Upload tool. We'll click Browse to go find our file. This will open a File Chooser dialog. We'll then need to navigate to wherever we saved our file. In my case, I saved it in Documents, then Courses, then CSI 1301, then Video Examples, and finally to rectangle_area.rkt. You'll obviously need to navigate to wherever you chose to save your file. Once I've selected my file, I click Open or hit Return or Enter to finalize the selection. That should take you back to the Canvas page, which should show you the name of the file you chose. Now we click the Submit Assignment button. That should upload your file to Canvas and take you back to the assignment page, showing you the details of your submission in the upper right. That includes things like we're told that we've submitted for this assignment, and we have the date and time of our submission. The Submission Details link would take us to a page that gives us the ability to add additional material to our submission and to see feedback that we've received on that assignment. Huzzah! We've submitted our assignment, and that wraps things up for this demonstration. There's a detailed documentation page on submitting assignments in Canvas that covers way more than we covered here. Feel free to use the QR code to access that page rather than trying to grab that complex URL from the video. Now, I'm going to sound like a broken record on this, but we all get lost sometimes, and it's vital to ask for help when that happens. In this case, make sure you ask if you're having trouble either saving your work or submitting a file on Canvas. Also, make sure you let me know if you're having trouble with important things like installing DrRacket, using the computer science lab computers, or understanding an example, a concept, or an exercise. Saving and submitting files definitely aren't the hard or interesting parts of the course. They're crucial activities, though, if we're going to give you feedback on your work and help you improve. So make sure you can pass the baton by saving your work and submitting it to Canvas. And to provide credit where credit is due, all the cartoon images were generated with the Bing Image Creator in 2023.